It's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
When to ignore your loved ones. Hey everybody, Joe Simons, Like Diamonds, back again, Salt Strong Unchurched. And the title is not exactly what it sounds like. I'm not inferring that you should ever just ignore your loved ones for the sake of loving them. However, if you have someone who genuinely does care about you, but is giving you advice that is, in their mind, meant to protect you, but is stopping you or preventing you from following your dreams, your purpose, your mission, then at that point, I do believe you should ignore them. And I'll give you a couple examples that have happened in my own life. And there's quite a few famous people from Walt Disney and Madonna and Jerry Seinfeld, their own parents and loved ones and coworkers literally laughed at them. Elvis Presley was literally laughed at, and multiple people, even his own family, was like, yeah, this you might want to look for a real job. This might not work out. And once again, they were saying that in a protective manner, not knowing that, this guy, Elvis, was destined for success. And had he listened to those loved ones and Walt Disney and all these people I'm going to talk about here, they never would have been successful. They never would have been a name that we all know and can talk about here, even after many of these people are deceased. So this all goes back to purpose. This all goes back to mission. And I think so many people that I've met, that I talk to on an ongoing basis, that send me messages and questions, they know deep down that they're called to do something different, called to do something big. They have big dreams. They have big visions. And many times it gets kind of poo-pooed, if you will, by their own loved ones. And it's tough to reject that advice. It's tough to kind of shake that off and not listen to them when you know deep down they're trying to help you in a protective manner, but many times holding you back. And this also goes, even if you're 65, 75, 85, 95 years old and listen to this, and maybe you've already passed the point of your career or whatever, this still applies to you, because you might be the person telling your own kids or grandkids maybe some advice that seems helpful, but is really holding them back from doing something absolutely big that, might be a little bit risky. It might be a little bit dangerous. Every one of these people did something incredibly risky, many times risking everything they had and then some, just to make their dream, their purpose, their mission happen. Heck, when Luke and I want to do a theme park, I mean, I've still had family members saying, "You sure that's a good idea? You don't know the first thing about doing a theme park." No, I don't, but I feel in my heart this is what I'm called to do. I got a really big dream on it. And any family members, any loved ones, even you, if you tell me don't do the theme park, I am going to shrug you off and not listen to you. And here's a good example. My very first job was in phone sales. And I've talked about this before. It was, God literally put me in this spot. I worked at that company for 9 years, and it was one of the best experiences of my life in terms of seeing a company grow and just having really good Christian leaders, and to understand what a good boss is, and how to grow a company strategically. And my own dad, who loves me to death and obviously only wants the best for him, and I love him. So this is not a knock on him. This happens in families across the world, and my dad's trying to protect me, and he was trying to talk me out of that job. Like, "Joe, you sure? Like, you just went to Georgia Tech. We spent all this money on you, and you're going to do telemarketing? That's not a career." And that's what he said. And for the most part, he was probably right. But I was like, "Dad, I'm telling you, something feels different about this." And, I started at $35,000 salary, but within a year, almost within a year, it was probably 18 months, I was already to like $92,000 just from the sales I was making. I realized I was pretty good at selling things over the phone to people. And before you know it, I was making multiple six figures at this job that, my dad told me was not a good one. And he wanted me to work for Southern Company, because that was why I worked at Georgia Tech in my co-op program. And Southern Company, I would have, if you know anything about Southern Company, it's a massive utility company. I worked there for a couple of years while I was in college. And I did get a job offer from them that was more money. It was like 52,000 versus 35,000. It's a big difference. But after working there for those years that I did through college, I knew it was so boring. Like you couldn't even get to like a VP status, which is really where I wanted to do things. I wanted to be a leader, and you literally had to be a certain age. It wasn't like in the bylaws, but it was in the bylaws, if you know what I mean. Like you had to be 40 years old or older to even be a senior VP of anything there. It was all based on tenure, on how long you've been there. And you had to work there for 20 plus years to really move your way up anywhere. And so it's just slow moving. You get your little, 2% raise every year. So I'd start at 50 and next 52, whatever, next year I'd be at 54. And you see my point there. It was not what I wanted to do. I wanted something where there was no cap. I believed in myself and I knew I could do it. And I took a massive pay cut in order to leapfrog and really learn something unique. Same thing happened when we started Salt Strong. I had multiple loved ones. They were proud of us and thought it was cool, but like even my own dad, he's like, I just don't get it. I don't understand how this is going to work. And I don't blame him. We didn't either. We didn't have the best business plan. Looking back, that was not the smartest thing. But I share this with you once again because I hear from people all the time, and I can sense it in the way they talk, and they light up if I'm face to face with them. I got friends who even like light up about, yeah, I really want to do this, but like my wife says it's a dumb idea and it's just too risky, or my dad or my mom or my aunt or my uncle who did this before in the past, they just say it's not a good idea, or it could fail. Of course it could fail. Anything wildly unique and something you're passionate about and maybe hasn't been done before, maybe you've never done before, of course it's risky. But I do believe God has put each and every one of us here for a specific purpose. And to me, there is nothing worse than when you do finally meet the maker. And I don't know how that whole experience is going to be. None of us truly do until it happens. But I do believe that we're going to go to heaven, at least some of us will be, and that we are going to get a chance to meet God, to meet Jesus. And I can't imagine how horrible it would feel to get there and realize that, man, I had all these tools and I didn't do anything with it, or God had this specific purpose for me to do this, something that I knew deep down I wanted to do, but I never pursued it because of a fear or because of what someone said, or even, a spouse or a really close parent or family friend told me this. So I never pursued it. And I just kind of took the slow, comfortable path. And vice versa. If you are older and you've, already, you're more of a sage. I think one of the worst things is sages, meaning someone who's lived life and has done it all. I think the worst thing that they could tell a younger person is not to pursue something because it might be risky. The good news is, a lot of sage seniors, if you will, realize and kind of have some regrets on things maybe they didn't do. According to that study of the top 5 things that people regretted on their deathbed. There's a whole book written on this, and they essentially interview people who were, had months to live in the hospital. And one of the biggest ones out of the 5 top things that people regretted was not pursuing something they knew they were supposed to do, and only pursuing something because they thought that was what would make them look better, because their parents wanted them to always be a doctor or lawyer, whatever it was. That was one of the top regrets. Really let that sink in. So let's talk about some of the people who were laughed at and told they shouldn't do this, and it was too risky and it'll never work. Number one is Walt Disney. I've read multiple books on Walt Disney. I think it's amazing. And his very first boss said he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Whoa. Walt Disney, he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. That was what his boss said. That is a quote from a real person who was his first boss. And even his own family, he had an interesting relationship with his parents, but they told him it was a horrible idea. How can you make money as an artist? You're going to starve. This whole animation thing's a joke. No one wants that. It's new. It's risky. Why would you do that? And obviously, we all know what happened with Walt Disney. J.K. Rowling, obviously, someone who now is one of the first billionaires for writing books. The Harry Potter series, and she was rejected over like 100 times for someone to even pick up this book. Multiple people laughed and said, like, there's just no way you're going to make this happen. She was even fired when she was working in one of her first jobs as a writer. Just wasn't good. Isn't that wild? Madonna, not a little bit cray-cray maybe these days, but she's obviously made a massive impact on just the music scene, regardless if you like her or not. But she dropped out of college against parents' will. Everyone was like, why? Once again, as a parent, you never really want your kid to drop out of college. Like, this is dumb. She moved to New York and she got a job. Can you guess where? At Dunkin' Donuts. That was where Madonna got a job just to pay bills. And she was fired within a couple of days for squirting jelly all over a customer. So she was fired and once again said, you're not going to make it a day in this show business thing. Give up. Oprah Winfrey also said to give up and was even fired from her job as a news reporter because she was too emotional with her stories, and also was fired again as a producer of another show in Baltimore. I mean, so Oprah Winfrey, right? Can you imagine the person that fired her looking now like, oh gosh? But once again, had she taken that to heart, whatever these bosses had told her when she got fired, we never would have heard of Oprah Winfrey. Like her or not, she's made a massive impact and is a billionaire. Next person, Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld, really wild story here. He was fired because of a horrible performance on the sitcom Benson. You guys remember the show Benson? Seinfeld was part of that in the very beginning, but didn't last long at all because he was horrible in front of the camera and speaking, and no one even told him. He found out when he showed up and discovered that his part was missing from the script. And they're like, yeah, you're fired. Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, you can imagine fired because he was a horrible performer. And had he listened to that, and I'm sure he even went to his parents and told them, like, well, maybe this whole stand-up showbiz thing is not going to work. Howard Stern was another one that just got completely laughed at and told him. I mentioned Elvis, another one. His first manager there, when he was trying to sing there at the Grand Ole Opry, and they said, you are better off returning to driving trucks. Don't come back. Elvis Presley. Isn't that wild? Thomas Edison was another one that people laughed at. Steve Jobs. I mean, heck, he was fired from his own company, right? I'm sure there had to be so much self-doubt and frustration and fear, like, oh my gosh, even the company that I started, I mean, the board literally fired him and says, you're not a fit, don't ever come back. And obviously he did come back and came back with a massive vengeance. Bill Gates was another one. I mean, he dropped out of Harvard, if you remember his whole story. And their very first business that he did with Paul Allen was called Trafodata. It flopped. Obviously, we've never heard of Trafodata. And once again, parents like, why are you dropping out? Maybe this whole Trafodata thing isn't going to work. It failed. Let's go back to school. This is what his parents and friends and family are telling him, putting pressure like, hey, like, yeah, you dropped out. You gave it a shot. You gave it a run. It bombed. Let's go back and just do things the safe way. Can you imagine how many people probably told Bill Gates that? And as a parent, it would be tough for me not to tell my own kids that, right? I mean, think about it. Your kids work so hard. They get into Harvard. It's really tough to do. I mean, what percentage of young people get into Harvard, right? To drop out of Harvard, one, that is a parent, you're probably, are you serious? Why don't you at least just finish? You only got a couple of years left. Just finish. Drop out of Harvard. And even if you were truly an entrepreneur parent and you're like, yeah, I want to support you, go for it, you believe in it. And then so they get investments from friends and family and the whole thing fails. At that point, I can't imagine many parents not wanting to say, hey, Bill Gates, little Bill Gates, you tried. Let's go back to school and try to take the safe route and maybe find a job with, a big company. I could see that coming out of my own mouth. And that's why it's so important. We don't know how Bill Gates was feeling. Obviously, he knew that there was something bigger inside of him. He knew there was something that he was supposed to do, that he could care less what other people said. Albert Einstein was another one. But this is why it's so important for you to listen to your gut, to listen to what God is putting in you, to listen to what you truly believe is your purpose and your passion here on this earth, regardless if it sounds crazy to others. If it makes sense to you and you really have somewhat of a plan to do it, go for it. Who cares what people think? Who cares what even your loved ones say? That's not their purpose. And many times, Abraham Lincoln was another one. I'm looking down this list. I mean, it keeps going. Marilyn Monroe, Vincent van Gogh. I mean, all these people who were literally laughed at. Steven Spielberg was another one. He was rejected from the University of Southern California School of Theater, Film, and Television 3 times. And eventually some other smaller school accepted him. And then he dropped out to try to pursue directing, which everyone told him was a horrible idea. You got to go back to school to even do that. I think we can all agree that Steven Spielberg did a pretty doggone good job just following his God-given gift and ignoring all of the naysayers. So I'm hoping this hits home with the right people. This was a kind of an interesting one. It kind of came out of nowhere. I was doing a little yard work and it just hit me on what to speak about. It's wild how God works through me to other people. I've had random people reach out that, had no idea we're even listening to this, saying, hey, that one, I felt like you were speaking to me. So I'm hoping this is hitting the right people, regardless if you feel like there's something you're supposed to do, or regardless if you feel like there's maybe something you're supposed to say to a loved one to give them the encouragement. Because in many of these cases too, reading the book about Walt Disney, and I mean, it's kind of like how a lot of movies are written. There's usually some other sage besides their loved ones. It could be, just some older person that really takes interest in them and a Walt Disney, whoever it might be, and just kind of keeps encouraging them, giving little nuggets. I mean, look at things like Star Wars, right? You got Yoda. There's always some sage there kind of helping them along the way, even if the parents are gone or whatever the journey they're on. There's usually some sage. So maybe that's you. Maybe you're the person who is supposed to encourage someone who is doing something that everyone else is laughing at. They're all of their parents and friends and family and spouses and ex-coworkers are all saying, that's the dumbest thing. I can't believe they're pursuing this. I mean, the girl who created Spanx, right? Also now a billionaire. Everyone laughed at her. If you look at her story, I mean, it is absolutely wild. And she self-funded that because no one would even invest in it in the beginning. And of course, as it grew, she got all kinds of people to invest. She's like, nope, I'm keeping 100% of this sucker. You ain't getting a dime. Sarah, you guys might know her name, and I'm blanking on it, but I got to see her speak at a conference, and it was just fascinating how she did it. It was just grit. And once again, her own family and friends and old coworkers were like, this is not going to work. Like, there's already massive businesses already selling pantyhose. No one is going to want this thing called Spanx. And obviously she proved them wrong and did not listen to loved ones. And now is a, very successful billionaire and awesome just person in terms of things that she gives back to. A really, really cool story if you aren't familiar with it. So anyway, I share that with you. I hope this hit the right person at the right time. And love you guys. This was a fun one for me because it was cool just hearing all these stories about people like Seinfeld and stuff that I have a lot of respect for and have loved watching. Just I didn't even know about that first job there on that on the set there where he got fired. No one even told him because of poor performance that, hey, this whole performing thing is not, it's not you. And obviously Seinfeld, the show, one of the most successful sitcoms of all time. So guys, have an amazing upcoming week, or depending on what day you might be listening to this. Have an amazing week. And if there's anything I could do to help, to pray for you, if you got questions, if you just need some encouragement from me, from some crazy idea that you have, let me know. I love hearing from so many of you every week. I don't get to every single email right away, but I do read all them, and I always try to reply at some point. So it's Joe, Joe, at saltstrong.com. And I'll talk to you on the next episode.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our souls to stay.